My name is Herbie May. I am Director of Engineering and R&D here at REMO. We are located in Valencia, California, and we're going to start on this side of the building, which is basically the side that we make all the standard drum heads. We're going to go to the other side of the building, which is where we make World Percussion drum heads and then World Percussion products. So we'll start here with our flesh hoops. And what we do here is we take these strips of aluminum, which are various widths and various thicknesses and various hardness. For instance, our Kevlar needs a harder aluminum, so it's like a virgin aluminum versus what most of our conventional flesh hoops are made from a recycled aluminum. So that's what you see over here. You see these large coils of aluminum. It goes through this machine that then forms a U-channel and then coils it up like a slinky right here. So this coil here goes to a certain height and will make a number of hoops. So what the operator will do is take that coil off, then he puts it on a sizing mandrel. So that sizing mandrel is basically a little bit larger than your drum shell. So you know that that head will always fit over your drum shell. So that's how we do it. So he's going to cut this coil off, take it to the hoop saw, and then make that an individual coil. We got to go around this curve here. Okay, so the next section that we'll go to is welding this joint. So what we had before is this coil, or continuous coil. We've now cut it and made that an individual hoop. So we drop that down and we butt join it together. And that's what these machines do here. So what these machines do is they sort of ramp up the heat and ramp down the heat, because if the food gets a little too hot, it will warp. And if it gets too cold, it will basically do the same thing when it comes back around. So as it comes around, it's welding this joint. The machine doesn't know if it's doing a 6-inch or an 18-inch. It just knows the joint is at the bottom, and there's a temperature unit here that measures that joint, and there's a range. So if it's not within that range, the machine will shut down and say, hey, there's something wrong, you're not going to get a good weld. So the machine pretty much checks itself as it goes around and as the operator loads it. So what we have here is like the next step in the process is to clean the hoop. If there's any residual dirt or oil in it, the resin won't bond to it. So we have to make sure the hoop is really clean. So what you're seeing here is like a miniature car wash. The operator loads the hoops, and you can see it has a wash chamber, and you can see the suds actually being put on the hoops. It has a rinse chamber. You can see it's washing it off, and then a drying stage at the very end there. So the hoops go through a 3-stage process. So when they come out, they're nice and warm and clean, and they're ready to have the glue installed. The hoops are held down with this sort of fence conveyor. Otherwise, they would get tangled up and they would go all over the place, because the cleaner is being, there's a lot of impingement on the part from the cleaner, and so it wants to move them around. So we have to hold them down with this fence conveyor. Okay, we're done with hoops. Now we're going to go to Mylar cutting. That's right over here. So if you look over here, I use the term Mylar like most people use the term Band-Aid, right? So it's polyester film. We do buy a lot of Mylar, which is made by DuPont, but we also buy other types of polyester film. And we also laminate different types of polyester film. So to give an example, you'll see an ebony, a black film here. So what we do here is we take that sort of beige looking film is what's our tried and true A film. It's what we make a coated ambassador out of, okay? So what we do when we want to make a black or an ebony ambassador is we take that same film and we dye it black. We don't use a different type of film that's normally made for window treatments that's cheaper and doesn't sound good. We use the film that we know that sounds good, and that's what we dye to get an ebony ambassador. So you know that if you just buy a clear ambassador or an ebony ambassador, you know you're going to have a good sound and lots of durability. So what we do is we take these large rolls of polyester film and they're brought over to this machine where they sheet them out into these large rectangles. And that's done here. And if you look at that screen up there at the top, there's a production schedule that goes out that tells the operator how to cut that rectangle to get the best yield. So essentially we're cutting circles from squares. So we want to have the least amount of scrap possible. So we dictate to the operator how to cut that film so we know we're getting the best yield out of it. So what they'll do is they'll sheet a certain thickness out, depending on how thick. It could be a 3 mil snare side or it could be a 14 mil film. They'll then take that stack of material, they'll bring it to this 50-ton press, and they'll die cut a circle using these dies that are similar to this. So it's a steel die, so when it comes down, it cuts a number of them out at one time. So the next stage is we're going to punch holes around the outer perimeter of the film. So we're going to walk around this way and I'll show you how that's done. So the next step in the process is to punch these holes around the outer perimeter. We do that with punch presses. And the reason we punch holes is so that the glue can weave itself through those holes and anchor it to the flesher. If I were to give you a quick analogy, if I were to try to hold, imagine my short sleeve as a piece of slippery Mylar. If I were to just try to pinch it and hold it, I wouldn't be able to hold it under an extreme tension. But if I had a hole that I could put my fingers through and anchor it, then that's what it does. So the holes give it this anchoring point to the flesher. So you can see here where they do the hole punching. It's similar to the way we cut a circle out. They put a stack of film and then it rotates and they punch the holes out. You can see So the next stage is the forming of the collar. So we have the holes punched. This particular case, this is going to be a P3 head. We already have the P3 ring on the underside. So what happens here is the film gets put into this die, and under heat and pressure it forms this collar. So when it comes out, it looks like that. So that was the start, this is the finish. So one unique thing that's different about our drum heads is we have this little thing we call the step here. And so what the step does is it makes sure that the film is flat and level with the flesher. So this little step right here rests on that inner leg of the flesh hoop. And like I said, when you put that in, that rests. So when you look across the plane of the head, it will always be flat and level. It's a very simple process for keeping the head level. It's something we've done for 60 years and it's something we never want to change. So this is the area where we apply the resin to the hoop, and we make our own pouring rigs here, and this is one where we mix a two-part resin system, and as it goes through this aluminum hoop, it dispenses it evenly around. It creates a starting point and a stopping point. You don't want more glue on one side than the other. You want it to be level. And so that's what the machine does. It creates that start and stop point. And then also, by the time the head goes through the conveyor and gets to the end, it's already cured so that we can stack them and they don't stick together. When you put your hand on here, you can feel there's a little bit of heat. It's called exotherm from the two-part that goes together. So what we have to do, we build in these properties in the resin system so that the film doesn't get too hot. If the film gets too hot, then it'll start to wrinkle and warp. So that's part of what we build into all of these pouring rigs. They basically all do the same thing, just different sizes. So you see smaller sizes, larger sizes over here. So by the time the heads come and get to the end of the conveyor system, like I said, they're not fully cured yet, but you're able to stack them without them sticking together. So that's a key point in faster production line. So this is where we do the Conga and Bongo heads, and the difference in this film is mainly the thickness. So it makes a pretty good wobble board because it's so thick and it's so flexible. So we made two types, one that we call symmetry and the other one that we call tucks. So this is a tuck Conga head, and this is made like a traditional tuck Conga head with animal skin, a cowhide, that has a steel ring, and the film is rolled over the steel ring and then trimmed, okay? It's very difficult to take a piece of film this thick and make it a small diameter and get rid of all the wrinkles and make it look nice. It took us quite a while to learn how to make this head, but this is a great head. It will never pull out, and this is new skin, so it sounds great. This is what we call a symmetry head. This is a symmetry Bongo. This is a symmetry Conga, and we call it symmetry because it has these symmetrical folds. So we dictate where we want these pleats to be because this thick material has to go somewhere. The big difference in the symmetry Conga head and the tuck Conga head is that the symmetry Conga head fits a lot more drums. This one, because of the nature of a steel ring, the counter hoop has to fit a certain way on this particular head. So there's so many different counter hoops out there. Sometimes if the counter hoop is a little bit too large, it wants to pull it off, and sometimes if it's too small, you won't be able to get it on. So we have a chart that shows which heads fit which on the various drums. But that's the main difference, is that a symmetry head just has a much wider range of drums that it works on versus the tucked head. So this is where they're actually putting the glue inside the symmetry Conga head, and this particular resin is a little bit different from the regular drum set resin, as it has to hold this really thick film and under quite a bit of tension. So this line is different from the regular drum set line. Also, one other thing to note, so what we do here on the symmetry head is after we pour this resin system in here, we go back and we crimp this leg over to profile it. And by profiling that leg, it creates a lot more strength in the hoop just by angling that leg inside. So you'll see that done a little bit further down the line. Okay, our next process is custom heads. So in our custom head department, they'll really make anything. They'll make a custom Dumbek head. If you had a fish skin head that came from the Middle East and you broke it, you could send that to us and we'll make you a synthetic head. We make different types of banjo heads. Banjo heads generally have a thinner hoop, a very, very small, fine flesh hoop. But most of the timpani heads that we make here, there's a lot of European timpani that have eyeball sizes. So we'll make those here and also put different insert rings. This is an aluminum insert ring. This is a low steel. We have a high steel. So that's basically what they do here. The dies are pretty much very, very custom, oddball sizes. We also make gigantic 7-foot diameter heads for University of Texas, for Purdue, for the Atlanta Braves. So all those gigantic heads would go through here, or all the really, really small heads like a 3.5-inch boobam head. All of those will be made in this department. Okay, our next step are crimp style heads. So most of our crimp style heads are made so that they'll take the strength of Kevlar. So if you look at this material, it's a woven fabric, and we use Kevlar and we use Tegnora. Tegnora is basically a aramid fiber that's made over in Japan. It's a really, really strong material. This is a Cybermax head, and we put a thin laminate of Mylar on the top. But the difference in this head is that it has a steel ring, sort of similar to the tug Conga head, where you have a steel ring and the material gets folded around and then the counter hoop goes down. So you would have, this would be the outer portion, and that would fit inside, and then you wrap the material around that. So like I said, you need an extremely strong hoop for the level and the tension that they use for drum corps, for college, for just about all marching now. This head will take upwards of 30,000 pounds load. It's incredible how high they go and the amount of tension that they take. So this is where we do what we call crimp lock, and the difference in crimp lock is that if you try to, like for the marching tenor drums, so if you try to use a glued head for marching tenor drums, or actually, let me start over. You want to use a glued head for marching tenor drums and not a steel ring crimped head for marching tenors. The difference is when you take a steel ring and you try to crimp 2 plies of film together, you always get a lot of wrinkling and you get a really dead sound. So the reason we do crimp lock is we want to use a glued head because you get a nice open sound, but we then also come back and we crimp this leg over so that it adds strength and rigidity when you're tuning it really tight, like what they do for the corps. This is a what we call an MP marching bass head, which is made the same way. This is a Power Max bass head, but basically it's made as a glued head, but it has this crimp profile on it, which adds rigidity to it when you go to tension it really, really tight. So this is where we do what we call crimp lock, the tenor heads, the Power Max bass heads. The next step is going to be coating, our coated process. So our coating process is sort of like the step. It's something that we've done a specific way for many, many years, and it's something that we don't want to change because it's a very simple process. So this conveyor, think of it as like, and the spray booth is like an X and a Y. So the heads are put on this conveyor and they're moving in the Y direction at a constant speed. Inside that booth in there, there's a spray head with a certain fan pattern that's always going back at a constant speed. So in this conveyor, it doesn't matter if I put an 8-inch head, a 24-inch, or a 40, it's all going to get the same thickness of coating, the same overlap of coating. And so that's important for like a drum set use, where you don't want your 10-inch coated ambassador to be thicker than your 16 or your 14. You want them all to be the same. So that's why we do this process. Like I said, it's a very, very simple conveyorized process where the overlapping strokes of the spray are always constant. I should mention one other thing here too, is that we formulate our own coating here. And so we formulate how rough we want it to be. We can make it really rough, not quite so rough. And so we know pretty much what jazz drummers like, the different brush sounds should be, because we started that way back when, some 55 years ago. So we don't use silk screens like other companies do, where you can't get the particles rough enough when you use a silk screen, because your silk screen has certain opening sizes. So this is basically like flocking a Christmas tree, right? You sort of blurt the material out so it creates this roughness to it. And that's the difference between ours and others, is it has this really unique texture to it for brushes. You know, they actually sold spray cans of the stuff.
I remember that. And then you could touch up your
Yeah, you could do your own ones, yeah. So all the heads get QC'd visually, so they go through this inspection under these fluorescent lights. A lot of times when you have a transparent film, it's kind of hard to see if you have a little scuff mark. So every head that we make is visually inspected. And if it has a scuff mark, unfortunately, we can't sell it. We'll either take it back, make a smaller head out of it. We have a machine back over there that knocks the aluminum out. So we recycle the aluminum and we recycle the film. But the only thing we can't save is the actual resin that goes into it. Now that's where you're going to start to see some drumhead. So every drummer that I give tour to, this is like the spot they want to get a photo of, right? You know, it's like drumhead heaven. Here we are. What do you need? We got it. There's marching, there's power max, there's snare side renaissance, there's pinstripe, you name it. So basically, once the heads get done, they get put on a shelf and then they get assigned a part number. After they get put on the shelf, then shipping comes and grabs, let's say, 10 of these to be used for Gretsch, 10 to be used for DW, and 20 to be put in a REMO box to go to a dealer. So it's generally the same drum head, but we sell the same head to OEM, original equipment manufacturers. So that's how they're divvied up, is here, and shipping will then come and grab these heads and then put the various logos on them. So this is a pretty good random sampling of some of the different silk screens. So there's some Ludwig heads, the older logo versus the new logo. The actual silver dot heads we make for Ludwig. This is where we do the stamping. They have a laser light that lines up the top logo to the bottom logo to make sure everything is in line. Over here we have these are going to be bass drum heads going to Pearl. The OEM companies, original equipment manufacturers, they basically want a stack of heads that they take out of a box and put on their drum. So they don't want packaging, they don't want to pay for the packaging, but a dealer wants it in a box. He wants all the labels, he wants all the verbiage about what the head does. So the heads then go into a box and then get all the labels on it. So that's how things get sort of moved around here. They get OEM logos, or they'll get a REMO logo, and then they'll get bulk packed or individually boxed. So this is our automatic box loading machine. So what it does is it takes a flat box that normally you would have to lift it up and fold all the flaps in by hand. So this machine basically takes a flat box, it lifts it up, it puts the flaps in, it puts the drum head in, and then it closes the box and then puts the label on the box for the dealer. So all the heads are aligned properly when you go to a dealer and see the heads on a shelf. So we're now at the World Percussion side of things. So the difference here is we're at the end of the process going back to the beginning. Like at drumheads, we started at the beginning. So just keep that in mind. We're at the end of the process here. So you're looking at the end of the World Percussion line. There's a Tubano, there's some djembes here and some other straight-sided Tubano drums. So the basis of what we do on World Percussion is that it started out back in the 80s as what was called PTS. PTS stood for pre-tuned system or pre-tuned series, and that was where you would take the film and you staple it onto a frame drum, and it would go to a very high pitch. The beauty of PTS was the fact that you could get a really, really high pitch, and by only having staples instead of really heavy tuning brackets, like for a tambourine, let's say, to get that real high pitch, it would add so much weight to a tambourine, and that's why in the early days, PTS products were so popular, because you could get a really high pitch and still have the instrument being extremely lightweight. So we still do that today. This is a Mondo head that has a deep collar, and the head is still stapled onto this frame. So this frame then can then be put on a tuning bracket, so you can still tune it like you would do a regular drum if it goes down. Or we have these types of heads that basically it's a pre-tuned head, and it drops on here to this sort of a rubber seal that allows the drum to sound good. Especially with a djembe, if you have the slightest amount of air leak between the head and the shell body, you won't get any bass sound, because the air is not being trapped and being able to resonate. So it has to form a tight seal. So we have a number of drums that have these sort of rubber seals that make it airtight. So we take that same basic PTS concept. You can actually sort of see the staples here underneath this trim. The beauty about staples and polyester film is that really you don't have, generally you have a number of tuning places around, which can be a little bit uneven. The beauty of having staples at 360 is the film is really bonded to the frame with the leg of the staple really holding it down and tight. And these heads last for decades, just years and years and years. This particular one has a rope suspension, so when you play it, it allows the drum to resonate for a very long time, versus holding it by the frame. And you hear it doesn't resonate anywhere near as long when you have that. So they're just easy to play. People use these in yoga groups, therapy sessions, you name it, rhythm wellness, all sorts of venues that we sell. These are called buffalo drums. They're basically like a traditional Native American frame drum. So we also make traditional taiko heads where we actually stitch the film over a steel ring, and that's done with a heavy-duty sewing machine. This sewing machine is made for leather. It'll stitch together very, very thick pieces of leather, which is essentially what this is. So we take a steel ring and we'll fold these flaps over, and then we'll stitch the flaps down over the steel ring, and to make a traditional taiko Japanese type of head. They're also made in Korea, in China, different countries. They use that same process where they put holes in it and they pull it down with rope to create the tension. So our drum shells are made from a recycled fiber that we saturate with a resin to create something like a piece of masonite, okay? And the thing about our shell is it's very resonant, and it's very, very strong, but visually it's not appealing, right? Because it looks like a piece of masonite. So generally what we'll do is we will put some sort of a grain to it, or we will cover it with wood. Like in this case, we'll actually use a real piece of maple to cover our shell. And in some cases, we'll finish it a little bit different. Believe it or not, this is actually the exact same shell. This shell is exactly the same as this shell. The only difference is, what we do is we originally take this shell and we wind it this thick, and then we cut this down and cut that down, and it makes it look like wood grain. So again, it's a great shell, very, very hard, but that looks like a traditional taiko drum now because of the way it's finished. We also have a curing machine here. So what we do to cure this shell is we put a UV coating on it. We put it on this mandrel that then rotates. As that mandrel is rotating, there's a UV light in that sort of aluminum box. So this is a welder shield, so you can see what's going on. So it has a UV coating and has a UV light and it's spinning. So when you turn the machine on, what happens is this is spinning and the UV light comes across it and it instantly cures the finish, so you're done. There's no solvents going in the air, there's no wait time, there's no nothing. So you put it in, it passes through the UV light, you take it out, and it's a finished product. It's a pretty cool process. So this is obviously our graphics department. So our graphic heads use a process called dye sublimation. And the thing that's different about dye sublimation, it's literally like a tattoo on your skin. And you know, people still call drumheads skins, right? Because it's some type of animal skin, always has been. So this process of dye sublimation is a process where what it does is it takes a colored gas of any image and it basically opens up the pores of the polyester film and embeds that colored gas into the film, just like a tattoo, so you can never get it off. But the beauty of a dye sublimated film is the fact that we don't have to laminate anything on top of it. So we can have a 10 mil ambassador weight film and put any image on it and it still sounds exactly like a clear 10 mil ambassador film. So that's the beauty of it. In the old days, when they were doing graphic heads, and a lot of companies still do it this way, they print on the top of the Mylar, which is a surface coating, right? So to protect that surface coating, they have to laminate something to it, which always deadens the sound and makes it sound different. With our sublimation process, there's no deadening that goes into it. Like I said, it's literally like a tattoo on your skin. So you can have just an incredible, long-lasting image on there that sounds really good. So if you look at all of our university bands, drum corps, winter guard, you name it, they all use these heads that have this dye sublimation process to it. And again, it's one of the things that's very unique to us. It's something that just creates a beautiful looking head, and that's what makes us different from the other guys. Okay, so this is what we call the Recreational Music Center, and this was Remo's vision, and I'll use Remo's analogy of a tennis court and a tennis racket. He always says, well, if you have a tennis racket, you need a tennis court, okay? So this is basically the tennis court for drums. So we supply all the different kinds of rackets, all the different types of drums, and people just come in and have fun. There's no wrong notes to play. They generally will set up, the seats in a circle. They'll have a facilitator that will then, just play some very simple things. And it's not about how many licks you know. It's not about who's the best player. It's about just kind of listening and just having fun. So this is what we call the Recreational Music Center. It used to be in North Hollywood when we were down there years ago. And we built this little area in the factory to do it. So we have kids drum circles here on Saturday. It's free. And we also have drum circles here every other Tuesday night for anybody that wants to drive up and just come and play drums and have fun. All you have to do is show up. So it's pretty cool. Well, thank you guys for coming out today to do the tour and to see how we do things at REMO. We're proud of what we do. If you're interested in finding anything from REMO, then go to Steve Weiss Music and check it out there.